Funding for Elwood City Limits is brought to you by Facebook,
Facebook.com/Elwood City Limits,
Twitter,
@ECL Podcast,
Tumblr,
ElwoodCityLimits.tumblr.com,
email,
ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com,
and by contributions from listeners like you.
literally at ElwoodCityLimits.libsyn.com.
Thank you.
Cha-ching, cha-ching, baby.
Stop whatever you're doing. Let me hear you say, Sunday was Lucas Mancini Day.
Happy Lucas Mancini Day to all the listeners out there. And do you know what's crazy, Will, is that Lucas Mancini Day actually was on the same day as Rusev Day this year, which is nuts. So happy Rusev Day as well.
How about that? What a coincidence.
No, I'm 23. It's good to be here. They call it the Michael Jordan year, and I plan to enjoy it. I'm already having a great time as a 23-year-old. Even though Blink-182 said no one would like me, I had a happy birthday, and I hope the year continues with the good vibes.
So I guess our I'll have to try and remember that our age gap is 5 years. I often forget that because I'll be turning 28 this summer. It's a long way to go before my birthday, but all the same, happy Lucas Mancini Day. Was it a good one?
Oh my God, it was awesome. I don't know if you saw on Twitter, you wanted to talk about my parents got some family friend of theirs to put together a UFC cake that was really impressive. Had a fake chocolate octagon and everything.
That was so cool.
It was very cool. I almost didn't want to eat it, but it was actually very good as well. Like, it was a cookie dough cake, which I hadn't had before. So it was like white cake with like a strip of cookie dough in the middle. So that was very tasty, but also aesthetically, it was just awesome. It was real, and the lady who made it, apparently she didn't know anything about UFC. She just did it from Google image searches. So I was really impressed.
I liked the little dig one of your friends got in about how GSP with his shoulders on the mat as he should be.
Oh my goodness, that was my boss. I couldn't believe that.
Oh, can't really get too spicy on the book with your boss. Well, I'm glad that you had a good birthday / Lucas Mancini Day, but there's a present that you haven't received yet, at least physically. I'm hoping to get that to you soon. Maybe I'll have to mail it myself, but I'm talking, of course, about the present that we received here at Elwood City Limits headquarters.
Oh, I saw. So I haven't seen this physical item in person, but I saw the pictures, and it's way up my alley. I'm all about this new craze, this new trend. So, you're talking about the enamel pins we received, right?
That's right. That's absolutely right. Sent by our wonderful listeners, Teresa and Stella. That's our first podcast gift. Thank you very much to both of you. It was a landmark moment for me. It was nice because I received it at the end of a long work day, so I came home and there it was, and it made me very, very happy. And I can't wait to give it to Lucas, hopefully sooner rather than later. But yeah, it's awesome. We don't at all require our listeners to give us gifts, but that's going to be something very special for this podcast that we're a year and a half into. I can't say enough good things about the item itself and about the gesture.
I was in Urban Outfitters the other day because Urban Outfitters gives you 20% off on your birthday.
Oh.
And I was in there and I saw they have like a little enamel pins kiosk, and there was enamel pins of the Arthur meme with his clenched fist, but they were officially branded Arthur merchandise. At least, you know what? I should have gotten a closer look at them, but from a distance, I could see the Arthur logo, and so it like the packaging had like the official Arthur logo. So I assumed it was like an official item, but it seemed odd that they were capitalizing on such a violent meme.
Yeah, that is. Whoa! I'm gonna have to go to Urban Outfitters sometime soon. Not wait for my birthday. That's a while away. All right, Lucas, it's been a while since we've recorded. We've got a couple of emails here in the backlog. Shall we get to them?
Yeah, hit me with the good stuff.
Okay. So our first one is the one that's been waited on for a long time. It's from Hawken Bailey. They say, about your last podcast, you talked about an ask from our Tumblr regarding the song Crazy Bus. I feel that I should correct a few things. So Hawken says, the songwriter for Crazy Bus, then head writer Joe Fallon, who is on the Arthur credits quite a bit, did not leave the show due to tax fraud. He and fellow head writer Ken Scarborough left to work on another PBS Kids show. Which PBS Kids show do you think they left for?
The Kratt Brothers Go Wild, or whatever that animated one is called.
Not quite, but it is a show that we've talked about before. It would be Between the Lions.
Oh my goodness, Between the Lines.
Yeah. I think the person who asked the question might have confused Joe Fallon leaving with the CNR tax scandal, which happened around the same time. So maybe the conflation of stories there, but accounts differ here.
It's all sorts of drama happening down at PBS.
Yeah.
You can never tell with those guys. They're going to make another Ken Burns documentary about the whole thing or something if it keeps going like this.
But it seems, but CNR, of course, is the Canadian animation group, so it seems that they had a bit of a scandal going on as well.
Huh.
We move on now to an email from Isaac. He wanted to point out that the martial arts that Sue Ellen was doing in the previous episode was Taekwondo. It's later revealed that Sue Ellen does indeed do Taekwondo. Also, Isaac's friend wanted him to list his top 5 Arthur characters. Are you ready for the list?
Before you get to the list, I will say that I should have picked up on that because my dad, believe it or not, I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before, is a 2nd-degree black belt in Taekwondo. So I should have recognized it when I saw it.
If not in the podcast, you've mentioned it to me, but dang, dude, your dad's the coolest.
I think so, too.
So this is Isaac's friend's list of his top 5 Arthur characters. We've got Binky in at number 5, criminally low, if you ask me. Number 4 is Muffy. Ooh.
Okay, this is just weird.
This is controversial. Number 3 is DW. Okay, that's
a solid choice. Solid number 3. I feel like my DW would be around there on my list as well, actually. That's probably where the DW spot is.
Number 2 is Francine.
I can see there's a very specific type of person who would put Francine that high on the list. It's like I wouldn't put Francine there, but I think Francine is she's got a lot of depth to her.
And here's the best part. Number 1, Mr. Ratburn.
A personal favorite of mine.
Final quote here from Isaac. The reason he likes Ratburn is because he thinks he's lit.
I guess Mr. Ratburn's pretty lit.
Yeah, in an educational kind of way.
He studies lit, perhaps. But
we go now to an email from John Dulong from the John Dulong Show. It's titled Bizarro ECL Pod.
Oh, I think I've heard of. I think I might have heard tell of what this email is about.
He says, "Hey guys, long time no write-in. First of all, I'm a fella who listens to a lot of podcasts. I say this as a way to flatter you guys, so some nice stuff there about us. But also to say that I typically listen at 2 times speed. In order to get your email address, I had to listen to the beginning of last week's episode over at elwoodcitylimits.libsyn.com. That's Libsyn. Listening to you guys at regular speed.
Wait. I'll do it for John. Libsyn.com.
LIBSYN. Listening to you guys at regular speed after the old double time experience makes you sound like you've had too much cake with Mr. Ratburn and you're lethargic. Imagine going cake crawling with Ratburn.
Oh my goodness gracious! I feel like I have one piece of cake and my tummy starts to hurt, so I definitely would not be able to. Whether it's a cake eating contest or let's say an old timey pie eating contest, I don't think I would fare too well.
John's writing us about a weird situation that happened to him this week. He tweeted to us that he thought that he saw you, Lucas, at the grocery store this past week.
That's right.
But it turned out that it wasn't you after all. Then he saw somebody that he thought was me driving down the street on his way to school 2 days later, which I confirmed that it wasn't me. Gentlemen, I have seen the Bizarro ECL pod crew in the wild. Your doppelgangers, your evil twins, the darkest timeline version of the ECL pod come to invade our timeline, which begs the question, what do Evil Will and Evil Lucas podcast about? John says that he thinks it might be the Katie and Orby radio hour, but I think the darkest timeline version of the ECL pod is something much more evil, sinister, much darker. It's that Teletubbies podcast that we joked about way back a year and a half ago.
I think we actually opened up a portal to the alternate Evil Will and Lucas dimension, and I think an audio file fell out on April 1st of last year. So if he wants to hear real-life evidence of the Bizarro version of this podcast, it exists. You just got to go back to an episode from April 1st of last year. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, that's true.
I'll also say this. People mistakenly recognize me all the time. I hear this from family members all the time, and it's because I'm pretty much the most average-looking person on the planet. I have a dark brown hair, a beard, and glasses, and I'm 5'6" with brown eyes. So there is a lot of people that look like me.
Your personal style is very in these days. There are a lot of people trying to jack your swagger. Anyhow, guys, enjoying the show. It's a pleasure, and of course, ladies and gentlemen, kids, you can listen to the John DeLong Show every Monday on Apple Podcasts and Google Play. I've been a guest on that show, so if you need an in, John and I talk a bit about wrestling, so you can go and check out that episode, but it's a good time. And he says, Lucas, perhaps we'll meet for real someday soon, and you can be a guest on his show. Cheers, John.
I can only hope.
Okay, one last email that actually just came in under the wire today. It's from Rohan. Hey, guys, my name is Rohan. Yes, just like Lord of the Rings. Thank you for answering my question before I got to it, Rohan. Just wanted to take some time to say how much I enjoy the show. Loves the back and forth. Loves our side tangents, especially when it comes to wrestling. Rohan says, hey, Colt Cabana, how you doing? But a couple of quick questions here. I'm going to save number one for the last. So since I know you guys are huge smarks, which means that we know a little bit about the backstage goings-on of wrestling, or think we do. Or think we do.
We know about the business.
Are you excited for WrestleMania? Hopefully we'll see AJ versus Shinsuke, something I never thought would happen just 5 years ago. Are you excited for WrestleMania at all, Lucas?
I'm always excited for WrestleMania. It's one of those things where it doesn't matter who's on it, what's happening, what's the direction going forward. It's the ritual of it. It's seeing it with my friends, all getting together. That's the part that I get really excited for. It's just 6 hours and nonstop fun. When it comes to actually like storyline stuff, I'm like, the main event, Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns, that kind of stuff. Not too stoked on that, but I'm always excited for WrestleMania. I'm excited to see what Flo Rida song they use this year. You know, I don't know if I've told this story on the podcast, but every time there's a WrestleMania, I get so excited that, and me and all my friends do this. We just listen to the WrestleMania theme over and over and over and over again on that weekend, like before the WrestleMania. And I swear, at first it was My House. The one year it was My House. That might have been a SummerSlam song now that I think about it. But the Give Me the Green Light by Pitbull featuring Flo Rida, there was a good like week and a half where I did not hear a piece of music that wasn't that song. So
everything that you dream gonna make you till you scream. Let
me tell you, there was like, I found depth in that song that I thought nobody... Like, I really spent too much time thinking about what Give Me the Green Light really was about. Lunch Money Lewis doing that dance. They drive those cars. Oh, my goodness. What a great song.
Much like Lucas, I get excited for spending WrestleMania with my friends because now I have my closest knit friend group are now into wrestling, so we really we go all out for WrestleMania. We even have like a sign to point to. It's just a great time. I love the atmosphere of that whole weekend. So regardless of what the card looks like, I think there'll always be a part of me that gets excited for WrestleMania, kind of like how I always get excited for the Royal Rumble. So I'll say a general yes. Rohan also asks, regarding the show, Arthur, what are your favorite unusual pairings? I really enjoyed Binky and DW during the Green Chip episode. So yeah, we were talking about how that's a good one. I'm trying to think of any more. I kind of like. I guess unusual for me is like kind of like in the episode we're going to talk about where Mr. Ratburn is kind of more friendly or to the kids. So he's a little bit more chummy with them. It's a little bit strange at first, but I like getting to see other sides of Mr. Ratburn.
I have a bunch. One of my favorite things about this show is when they put two contrasting characters with one another. A recent example is Buster and Fern as a detective duo. I thought that was really fun. Binky and DW is a really interesting and funny pairing. And Brain and Brain and Francine out for revenge was also a fun pairing. Specifically, Evil Brain.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun with that character. I agree on Buster and Fern. That was one I would have never seen coming, but
that was Buster and Fern could have their own like show, and it's just them trying to solve like schoolyard mysteries, and that would be awesome. I loved Buster and Fern as a pair.
Postcards from Buster and Fern. Okay, Rohan's final question here, which is actually their first. Have you guys ever considered making some money off the podcast? Again, I'm also anti-corporatism and making your entire podcast about ads, but you guys work pretty hard on this show and tend to have a show out every week and, of course, our day jobs. It definitely ain't easy. I get why you don't monetize it, but I just want to let you know I'd gladly pay a few bucks to get more insight into the mind of Mancini. You're a hot property.
I think we're both a hot property. My answer for this is that, I mean, we don't really know how. If Squarespace picks up the phone, buddy, you better know I'm going to answer it. I ain't too proud to sling some Blue Apron, if you know what I'm saying. But I don't really know how to set up those deals, to be honest with you.
I think it has to do with your podcast has to like get so many. I think I looked into this one time. Like you have to get so many listens within a week or within a time period, and I don't think we're quite there yet. And if you don't mind, I'll just kind of not answer for us, but I'll just kind of put this in here. I did consider at one point at the year mark, actually, Lucas and I had a little bit of a discussion about like, should we get a Patreon? Should we start looking towards doing monetary kind of stuff? So the thing about that is twofold. First of all, I guess this kind of comes from my own maybe lack of self-esteem, but I don't want to assume that there are a lot of people out there who would be willing to pay for us. Not that this podcast would ever be behind a paywall. This is going to be free for even if we do decide to monetize at some point. If we ever decide to get a Patreon, that's a lot of work. And I know for people I know who have had Patreon campaigns and all that sort of thing, eventually the work you put into it equals the money you get back. Like, a lot the typical story is like, oh, I make so much money off of Patreon, I don't need a day job, that kind of thing. But it also does take a lot of extra work. And to be honest with you, between my part-time job right now and editing the podcast, doing the podcast, we have been skipping weeks every now and then just because it's just not worked out for us time-wise. And then just thinking about, having to produce extra content, whether that's, physically making things, physically mailing things. It's a big, it's a risk and it's an investment in my time and in actual money. I don't want to say never, but I'll put this out to you, Rohan, and everybody who's listening. I'd like to know if you would, you can if you shoot us a quick message of just like, no, I probably wouldn't, pay for a Patreon tier, or you would. It's kind of hard to gauge, I guess, audience interest in this sort of thing. So I'm reluctant to do it, not because I'm reluctant to make money. That would be awesome, but also because I know that. And I've actually gotten this too. Sorry, I'm rambling a bit with this, so I'll try and wrap it up. That when podcasts add Patreon tiers and add like new content, I know that I have a friend who sees that as like really distasteful. Like they want to hear all of the content without having to pay for it.
Well, I don't know about that. If it's extra, if it's not putting, I know what your friend's coming from, but if it's not putting something that already was free behind a paywall, I don't see any, like if we were to come up with a Patreon, it'd be something like a wrestling podcast or some extra stuff for people who are already fans of Elwood City Limits. And I'll also say this, if you want to help out the podcast in any way, the biggest thing you could do is tell a friend who you might think would enjoy it. That's the number one thing you could do for us, more so than just giving us money directly, is spreading the word and letting people know that you think we're funny, or this show is good or entertaining, or if they like Arthur or just animation or podcasts. That's the number one way you can help us out.
That's absolutely true. Another great way is, of course, constructive feedback. If you ever want to email us with something that you don't want to be read on the air, but that sort of thing, we would always appreciate that too. I will also add that on our Libsyn site, we do have a PayPal donate link. So if you ever do want to kick us a couple bucks for whatever reason, you can go ahead and do just that. But there's absolutely no pressure to. So we're going to keep kind of gauging interest. Rohan, I really appreciate your email. He adds, they add, as long as you keep making them, I'll keep listening. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's email and everybody's continued support of the podcast. Whether or not we'll get a Patreon or any sort of, want the podcast to be financial of some degree, the short answer is I'm not sure. But we're going to keep it in mind, and I'm just happy that we made it to a year and a half, going on 2 years, and we're still having fun, and there's still so much to talk about. So I just want to make sure that we keep our wheels on the road before we take a turn. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I'm picking up what you're putting down.
All right. Okay, those were a lot of emails sent in to elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Thank you very much. All right, let's do it. It's time to get to the episode. Today, we are talking about, first of all, Arthur's treasure hunt. This is another one that I kind of had a vague familiarity with, but I was a little surprised. The episode starting off with Arthur trying to make some sort of kitchen concoction, not going too well. And he's talking about what if important people in history had to do everything that their parents told them. So Arthur goes through a couple of scenarios where he is the historical figure, but he is unfortunately kowtowing to his dad. So first of all, he's Galileo with this really this glued on beard.
This is like kind of a high concept intro, because Arthur poses quite the philosophical question. I think the way he phrases it is, what if other famous the way he phrases it, like explorers or inventors or something, had to listen to everything or stop when their dad told them to, which is like, what if?
And so it's like he's, about to discover Jupiter or some such, and his dad tells him to go to bed. He's Sir Isaac Newton. The apple falls on his head, and his dad says, "Stop moping around. Do you expect ideas to fall from the sky?" Har, har, har. And then it turns out this is just a long-winded way for Arthur to justify trying to make a bacon-flavored milkshake with his dad's good cooking equipment.
Which a little bit of, speaking of apples falling from the tree, that sounds like something out of his dad's book, given his recent culinary escapades and experiments. Also, a bacon shake, I'd try it.
Nope.
Bacon donuts. At the coffee shop I work at, they sell a bacon, it's like a cereal bar, so it's like an adult Rice Krispie square, basically, like a homemade one, and they have bacon in that. I wouldn't, I'm not excited about it, but I wouldn't say no if someone offered it to me.
I would absolutely say no. There's no way that I am, there's no way, dude. Come on. I think Arthur's taste buds are starting to be ruined by all of the kitchen liberties that his father is taking.
I will say that the bacon does look pretty unappetizing when it's uncooked.
Yeah, it looks,
and like all around the kitchen, like with all the like flour, I guess. Like there's like a weird powder to this shake. Maybe Arthur's mixing it as creatine. Maybe that's why he's got bacon in the first place. It's like this super high protein
He's trying to make the stack or two of milkshakes. The episode starts with the gang are skipping rocks at the pond. Been a long time since I've skipped a good rock. Buster comes up to them. He's out of breath because he's brought them an arrowhead that he dug up out of his yard. Skips it.
I gotta back on my soapbox again. This was one of the first things we ever talked about in Elwood City Limits. I think it was either episode 2 or episode 3, where children's TV gives kids unrealistic expectations to what they can achieve in archaeology, okay? I don't care who you are, the chances are so slim that you would find a Native American arrowhead buried in your backyard. It's just not gonna happen. And cartoons like this always got me thinking that I could find like buried treasure or like some dinosaur fossil if I just happened to dig a little bit. It's not gonna happen.
Yeah, kids, I don't recommend digging up any part of your parents' yard to try and find arrowheads or any sort of knick-knackery because Lucas, you said it best. This is just really stretching the truth a little bit farther than it's meant to be stretched, which, Buster mentions that he was digging around in his mom's garden and found it, and the brain kind of runs with it. Like, he explains what an arrowhead is, and then Arthur's like, we could find this stuff in our backyard? And he's like, maybe. All you got to do is dig.
The brain should have just showed them that Canadian heritage moment where it's like a first-person view of, like, a guy with a spear. This is one of the all-time, like, most poorly produced heritage moments, or at least it's the funniest to look back on because of the production elements. It's very 90s FMV, but it's like a first person guy holding a spear and he like stabs a guy and then the guy fades away and then it cuts to modern times and a guy digs up an arrowhead and he goes, "Do you want to know what I think this is?" And then it ends.
Helga and Stiga Ingstrom, or what have you.
Yes, that's the one. Good memory, Will.
Well, of course, I have a flair for Canadian heritage commercials. And there's like a first person segment to that.
It's like Mist or something. It's very bizarre. The music's very like, the whole thing is like very 90s. But I just want like brain to pull the arrowhead from Buster and be like, "Do you want to know what I think this is?"
Speaking of video games, Arthur, looking in his imagination, digs up what looks like the set of that movie. Did you ever play L.A. Noire?
No.
Okay, because there's like a real movie set that the main character goes to, and I forget what it is, but it's like a giant coliseum. It's like
ancient Rome.
Yeah, it's like he's unearthing Spartacus essentially.
But
that's what made me think of that. So Arthur is very excited to go dig and basically badgers his mom into letting him dig in a very small place, kind of behind the shed. And of course, this is going to be mainly an Arthur and DW episode because DW has nothing better to do than to just kind of badger Arthur.
She's not really. You know what? DW is less of a badger, and like DW's not really an annoyance in this episode. She's more like just random comic relief. She's just along for the ride, and I like her in that role.
Also, she's kind of the one who's talking sense throughout the episode, so that's a little bit of a weird hat for her to wear. The first thing that's found is DW pulls out a root that looks like a snake, and Arthur thinks that it's real. It's actually a pretty cool looking root. It does look a lot like a snake.
She says that not even the Tibble twins fell for that, and they're 4. And then she tries to trick Arthur into trading dimes for a penny, Want to trade
one of your tiny dimes for a big shiny penny?
One of the oldest tricks in the book.
Accentuate the positives, hide the negatives. That is the way to try and sell that. The first thing that Arthur digs up and finds, it's a... does he find the bone after this?
The first thing he finds is the digestive biscuits.
Yeah, the tin of digestive biscuits, which this is a great line. DW's like, what's digestive mean? Arthur says, like Reader's Digest, I guess. DW's like, what a dumb flavor. Reader's Digest, that's a 90s thing to reference. My mom had a subscription to that for a long time.
I mean, Reader's Digest, you read it while you poop. Digestive biscuits, they make you poop. It kind of makes sense.
So how do you think those biscuits got there to begin with, or that at least that tin? Like, is there anything in them?
Well, spoilers for the end of the episode, but they did say they're 40 years old. So what's 40 years away from 1990? What are we at now? 1996?
No, I think we're in 1998 or 99.
Okay, 98. What's 40 years away from 98? Let's mental math. Is that what?
That's the end of the 50s.
The end of the 50s? Yeah, they were just throwing stuff. People didn't care about littering in the 50s. Are you kidding me? You'd, like, buy something and you'd immediately, like, throw it out your window.
I'm afraid they might have, like, buried some kind of animal in there.
Oh, well, that's dark. I thought they were just, like, not being very environmentally friendly, but...
Buried not a funny animal. They didn't bury a funny animal, like an animal.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so they kind of take that as a bit of a disappointment. Arthur then digs up a plastic bone that Pal buried in the yard. And that kind of leads to the next thing. He also has, like, an imagination of what he thinks that everybody else is going to be digging up. So there's, like, a cutaway of Binky using the wheel from Conan the Barbarian to unearth, like, the head of the Sphinx.
That was really funny. But some of these I didn't quite understand. There's a running gag in this episode where, and it starts with this imagination sequence, where Brain uses a metal detector, and he, like, it beeps, it goes off, so he's like, okay, there's metal buried here. And then he digs up a metal detector, which he proceeds to throw into a pile of dirty metal detectors. And I'm just a little bit confused. Like, what's the joke? Like, I don't get it. Like, is it like a dig at metal detectors? Like, they're junk, so people, when they get bored of them, they bury them? Will, is there something I'm missing here?
I'm not sure, because I asked in my notes, how many metal detectors did Brain bury and why? Like, I just...
Yeah, like, did he put the metal detectors there? Or, like, I get it's, like, supposed to be a joke, I think. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't think I do either.
I mean, I'm kind of into it. It's, like, kind of some kind of bizarre, like, maybe, like, on a Tim and Eric level of, like, anti-humor. Like, why does he have all these metal detectors? But it's just, like, I'm confused.
Also worth noting that in that brain imagination thing where he's wearing the metal detector, he's got, like, the headphones so he can hear, like, the crackling. The headphones are on his proper ears, not like in that popular image macro where Arthur's wearing it on the side of his head.
That's. I'm glad you pointed that out, Will. Someone needs to tell the truth.
Absolutely. I also want to quickly note here that I noticed in this episode that DW's voice actor, Michael Kalos, is beginning to sound a little older and a little bit less like a little girl.
Interesting. I didn't quite notice that, but I bet now, going forward, now that you've mentioned it, I'm going to keep an ear out for it.
So Pal is digging a hole in the backyard, and Arthur kind of sees it. And then, so this is kind of he's basically edging around the concept of, like, digging more holes in other parts of the backyard. And so he's just kind of like, it's not very deep or very wide. And he's just like, I'm fixing it, but he's just making it bigger. And DW says, she says that. It's like, you're not fixing it. You're making it bigger. Mom's gonna plots. When's the last time you heard plots?
About half a second ago when you said it for the first time that I've ever heard it.
Wow. Wait, you never watched any Animaniacs with Mr. Plots?
I guess I just thought that was his Christian name.
Not quite. It is a joke, as Animaniacs are wont to do. So DW is wondering what potentially Arthur could find by digging up the rest of the backyard, and we get again, a lot of cutaways in this episode where Arthur imagines that he finds this underground door that's decorated with, like, runes and a minotaur. It's like like Guillermo del Toro put it there.
He's gonna get chased around in a maze.
He pretty much stumbles into talking about Myst, an old Sierra game where it's funny you said that. I actually had the Sierra game note here. He finds a torch and he goes down some winding stairs and through this cavern that looks like it's from the end of Return of the King. And eventually he, like, goes through all of these twists and turns and ends up in Buster's closet. So he finds
this was a great piece of, like, visual humor. I love this because, like, he gets to the final door and, like, it's one of those things where, like, it's, like, so lit and it's this like white glow. You're thinking, what is behind this door? And then Arthur, I thought he was gonna say, "Oh my god," but like the way he delivered the line, he goes, "Oh my gosh." And then it's like Buster's room, and it just kind of like sucks the air out of the room, and he's like, "Oh hi, Arthur, what are you doing in my closet?"
Yeah, you want half.
It's just a weird joke.
You want half a sandwich? Yeah, it's a long way to go for that. I will also mention that this episode does not fully capture just how awful digging is. Like, Arthur's going to be doing a lot of digging, but, like, digging holes, like, there's a reason why there's a kid's book about digging holes is awful, because it's just hot, sweaty work for no gain.
I mean, didn't you ever try and dig a hole to China when you were a little kid?
No, sir, I did not.
I've fond memories of trying to get to China.
My mom would never ever let me, and I would never want to try. I was a lazy kid, and that grew up into a lazy man. So Arthur is still trying to get DW to give him the last thing that he needs in order to dig up the rest of the backyard, because he says it's not just for me. Into like basically 10 seconds from one flashback into, I keep using these words interchangeably, from one imagination into another. And it's this hypothetical scenario where they're doing a barbecue in the middle of the night, the Reed family are, and Dad forgets to buy charcoal. And we get a couple of good reads here from Mom where she's like, I guess we'll have to cancel the barbecue. And then
I love how this wouldn't work if it wasn't for how over the top it is.
Yeah.
Like how oddly specific the problem and solution Arthur comes up with, that he just happened to find a secret passage into the grocery store at night. I love the detail where I was like, is Arthur just gonna steal that charcoal? And then he like calculates the tax in his head and pays for it with the honor system. And then of course the maraschino cherry, mwah, the icing on the cake of this joke is Mom's final line, where she's like, it's a good thing you didn't listen to me, though they do kind of ruin it by having DW point out that that's like a ridiculous thing that she would never say.
But I kind of like that. I liked how it goes immediately from Mom saying it to DW looking Arthur straight in the eye, like dead-eyed, just, it's a good thing you didn't listen to me? You honestly think she'll say that? And Arthur's like, well, she could. So I thought that was funny. And then finally, DW's still not sure. And Arthur, we get a little bit of his manipulative side in this episode when he's just like, okay, fine. If you want to be a barbecue wrecker, then we won't dig any more holes. Like really guilting her into basically giving him permission to dig up the rest of the backyard. DW's like, maybe you could dig a little. Then we get a montage of Arthur going ham, digging all those holes. Essentially, they dig up the entire backyard and don't find anything. Arthur's about to move to the front yard, and then all of his friends come back to report their findings. And Arthur, again, he has a big anxiety that everybody will have better stuff than him. But it turns out all the stuff that they found is pretty unremarkable, all things considered. The one that I wrote down here is Binky brings to them a root that he thinks looks like an iguana, and he decides to call it Enguan.
And then DW says, you named your root? And then Binky responds with, I name all my roots.
Muffy like has like a pearl necklace that she bought from a jewelry store that she justifies by saying that jewels do come from the ground or whatever.
Brain has some pennies from the 70s.
Yep. That reminds me, I haven't found a penny on the sidewalk in a long time. Not that it would do me any good, because pennies are worthless.
I was just going to say, Will, that's because they are illegal.
That's right.
In Canada.
So, and then Arthur finally reveals what he found, including the tin of digestive biscuits, which everybody thinks is really cool.
Actually, Arthur doesn't even bring out the tin. He's like, oh, we found some rocks, but I didn't name any of them, like the Binky's root. He's like distraught. And then DW produces the tin of digestive biscuits. And
Brain supposes that it's probably around 40 years old, and we get the line that made my hair turn gray. That Muffy says, that's how old my mom is. That's ancient.
That's funny though. Kids always think like you tell like a little kid you're 16, they're like, "Wow, do you have a mortgage?"
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is a good kid joke. So, yeah, I remember those days when 40 seemed old, and now, well, it's coming sooner than it isn't. But Buster says that Arthur's really lucky that his mom let him dig up the backyard, and Arthur kind of like snaps out of it and realizes that what he did. So he enlists everybody's help to dig up the backyard, to fill in all the holes, basically.
So we have this quick montage of people filling in the holes, but I have some questions.
Yeah.
There's a part where they're like putting stones back onto a path. It's like, Arthur, why are you taking those stones off the path? He wasn't even digging there. He was just destroying his backyard.
Yeah, and essentially, I mean, they do fill the holes, but all of the evidence is still there, and of course, they're all covered in dirt. Mom comes home, and they try a couple of quick excuses, like outlandish excuses for why they're covered in dirt and why there's holes. But then Arthur just kind of fesses up, and we do get it's a bit of a grave end to the whole thing. You know, Arthur's very sincere and apologizing, and then Mom says, "After I specifically told you not to, I'm disappointed, Arthur, very disappointed." And it's like, usually in instances like this, we get like, it's like, well, you did the wrong thing, but I'm glad that you told me. But it's like, nope, Mom is just mad. And I imagine that she really would be, because now she's going to have to pay to resod all of that grass.
What are you talking about? Bicky took that like loose piece of grass and placed it on top of that hole.
Yeah, luckily. So maybe they can get away with that one. But the rest, well, that's going to cost them. The episode ends with everybody in Mr. Ratburn's class the next day, and Arthur saying that he found an old harmonica in his parents' garage, which Buster and Brain take to mean that Arthur is grounded for the rest of the week and is cleaning out the garage, which he says is true. And it looks like he's grounded until the week after next. So he's grounded for a good couple weeks.
Yikes.
And yeah, there you go. And now, a word from us kids. So not a whole lot to say about this one. This is talking about a school gardening club. And I don't think my school ever had a garden club.
I don't think mine did either. They're planting geraniums.
Yeah, that was a project that I did in school once, but we did that in glass jars.
A couple things from this.
Yeah.
At some point, one kid tells the other, "Okay, good job, Jamal," which I just like that. That was just fun. Also, at the very, very end, they try to sneak in this part where the kids, again, unrealistic expectations, dig up a horseshoe, okay? And, do you think this was staged, Will?
I have the same question. In my notes.
For lack of a better term, do you think this was a planted horseshoe? And the thing that definitely gives me pause is at one point the kid says this line very unnaturally where they're like, "Oh, we just saw this old thing." And that sounds like something a producer would tell a child to do for B-roll.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past them. I'm just like, well, they didn't find anything, so here's a horseshoe, and that seems like something that would be buried. So not to call anybody out here, but I find this a little dubious myself, and I wanted to ask you the same thing.
But hey, no matter what, Jamal did a good job.
He sure did.
And we should all strive to be like Jamal.
Good job, Jamal. Good job, Jamal.
Yeah. Hashtag good job, Jamal.
And now, back to Arthur.
All right, second half of the episode is here. It's Return of the King. No, not that Return of the King. This whole episode takes place at the Elwood City Renaissance Fair?
Oh, weird. Right here I had Mount Doom? No?
No, sorry.
The Mines of Moria? No,
not at all. That's back in the Arthurship of the Ring.
Oh.
So the what I guess is called the Elwood City Ren Fair. I guess that was its actual name. I can't remember if I saw it or not. Mr. Ratburn's class is there for a class field trip, and they're just taking in everything. And, of course, we get all the appropriate jokes, including Buster wanting to try some haggis.
There's a part where, like, Mr. Ratburn's like, okay, pay attention and take notes of, like, all this historical stuff because you will be quizzed on it. And there's, like, a guy yelling, haggis, 2 for $1. And there's a great moment where Buster's like, 2 haggis? 2 for $1. Like, he writes that down like it'll be on the test.
Have you ever had haggis?
No. I have, like, me and my sister have these 2, like, haggis tree ornaments for a Christmas tree that we bought in Cape Breton. That's, like, the closest I've ever had to trying haggis. But no, I haven't had it. I think my sister had it when she went to Ireland or Scotland.
I'd really like to try some. Kids, if you're not aware, haggis it's I'm getting this from Wikipedia, of course, a savory pudding containing sheep's pluck, which is the heart, liver, and lungs of a sheep, minced with onion, oatmeal, spices, and salt. Kind of, to me, the way it looks kind of reminds me of a cabbage roll, which is big in my family. So yeah, hopefully I'll get to try haggis one of these days. Mr. Ratburn spots the golden griffin, which is given to the the class that determines the most knowledge about medieval history or some such. We get a cut of Arthur here, Ferris Buellering, and he's just like, boy, Mr. Ratburn really wants that golden griffin.
I do like, you talked about, though, changes in character. We get to see Mr. Ratburn's competitive side in this episode, which is not something I'm so used to seeing, and I thought it was an interesting twist with him.
Also, him enthusiastic in a way that we don't normally see either. And Arthur thinks that they're a cinch for the Golden Griffin because no other class works harder than they do, which, as we've seen so far with the classes at Lakewood Elementary, is very true. But then all of a sudden, a great rumble is heard in the distance, and in comes the class from what looks to be private school Glenbrook Academy.
Led by their fearless leader, teacher Mr. Price Jones. And let me just say this, Will, of all the decisions made with this episode, by far the most genius writing decision is that whenever a character refers to Mr. Price Jones, they say his full name. I don't know why, but I find that hilarious. Especially in the Buster lines, when Buster's talking about Mr. Price Jones, it's really funny to me that they say his full name.
I agree, and I really have to also applaud the decision to make the knowledgeable, elitist rival teacher have a compound last name. There's something about a compound that last name that really makes a person a little bit more hateable.
But we are also beating around the bush here. The big important thing about this grand entrance is that there's Bizarro Arthur character. Speaking about, earlier we were talking about Bizarro Will and Lucas.
Oh man. You're right. What a confluence.
It's like that episode where the G.I. Joes go to the other dimension, where the G.I. Joes are evil, and then they leave some of the G.I. Joes in that dimension and then go back to their dimension because they had to figure out a way to sell kids new toys without actually killing the G.I. Joe characters.
Were the G.I. Joes, were the evil Joes still called G.I. Joe?
I don't remember. In fact, they might not even have been evil. I think I got that wrong. I think it's actually another dimension where Cobra had taken over. And it's and so the G.I. Joes were still the good guys, but they were like a scrappy underdog in this new Cobra regime. And so some of the Joes, I think Shipwreck and some of the other lesser Joes stay behind so they could replace them with new toys.
I see. By the way, I know that I said a compound last name makes you a little bit more hateable. No offense to anybody who has a compound last name. I do think that they're cool, but there can be, especially with this character, there's an air of snobbery about having a double last name that you have to admit works pretty well. And it goes.
Let me tell you, me, they just added Gossip Girl to Netflix, and me and my girlfriend have been watching a lot of Gossip Girl. And there are compound last names abound in that show, so that should tell you something.
Yeah, I think the stereotype that it's for wealthy people, and the name goes even better with the performance of Mr. Price Jones, who I think is awesome. He's an older also rat character who is Mr. Ratburn's old teacher. Mr. Ratburn used to go to Glenbrook Academy himself, and he's got a very affected American accent of just like, it's like, the thing is, Ratburn, you can't beat us. It's like if Fraser Crane was his teacher.
What was the 70s WCW jobber's name? Number one Paul Jones? There's like a 70s NWA wrestler that is number one something Jones, and I was trying to figure it out, but that's what people saying Mr. Price Jones over and over again was reminding me of. Number one, here, I gotta Google this. This is killing me.
Yeah, I'm doing it too.
Number one WCW Jones. I think it's Paul. Yeah, number one Paul Jones.
That's a pretty good name. I like that name.
From Charlotte, North Carolina.
Because of course he is. If he's in the NWA.
Oh my goodness, he had 23 championship reigns and led the stable Paul Jones's Army.
So does that make the Glenbrook kids Mr. Price Jones's Army?
That they're Price Jones's Army.
No, number one Price Jones.
Number one, yeah, exactly. I mean, he literally is the defending champion of this Ren Fair.
That's true. They've won the Golden Griffin like, I don't know, X amount of years in a row. I forget how long. So basically, what the competition amounts to is a series of mini games.
I'm sorry, Will. I just have to say that in 1983, Paul Jones developed a gimmick of wearing tuxedos and created an angle in which he held a contest in which a large poster of himself dressed in a white tuxedo would be awarded as a prize to the winner. This led to a memorable episode of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling in which the winner of the poster was revealed to be a young, attractive woman. As she walked under the ringside set to claim her prize, she attempted to embrace Jones with a kiss as a way of thanking him. But Jones was embarrassed and backed away quickly. And then Rufus R. Jones came to the ladies' rescue and attacked by Paul. Oh my goodness gracious!
All right, so
there was a feud between Paul Jones and Rufus R. Jones.
So I'm
no relation.
So I've got the Wikipedia page for Paul Jones wrestler open here, and I'm gonna put that aside for further reading after we're done here, because clearly
he had a hair versus hair match with Jimmy Valiant.
All right. Let's leave some for the kids at home to discover, and let's keep going with this episode here with number one Price Jones. So it's basically amounts to a bunch of mini games, competitions between the Arthur kids and their respective doppelgangers from Mr. Price Jones's class. The first one is Arthur running, and they do make a little joke about it of Arthur being like, "Have we ever played softball against those guys? I don't know. They look really familiar." So the first thing is Arthur is racing through a maze with his twin from number one Price Jones's class, Chester.
And Chester gets some different advice from Mr. Price Jones. He says to navigate via the wind direction and the treetops. Mr. Rapper opts for more metaphysical advice, like very Yoda-esque, and tells him to basically use the Force and follow his heart.
I liked this line here from the guy who's playing, because it's Merlin's maze, and to signal that the competition has begun, he says, "Hi thee hence," but Arthur doesn't know what that means, and so he has to go, "That means go, kid."
All of the Red Fair actors, there's a jester later on, they're all great in this episode.
So they run through the maze. Arthur hits a dead end. We get this weird moment where Arthur sees what he thinks is his shadow on the wall, but it's it kind of does the shadow gag where it's doing the same things he does, but then it turns out it isn't his shadow. I guess it was Chester or something, and then Arthur accidentally rips through a wall and I guess disqualifies himself from the maze.
Or at least he got beat because the Chester got there before him.
But in doing so, Arthur finds one of the Ren Fair's attractions, which is trying to pull the sword out of the stone, trying to pull King Arthur's Excalibur out of a stone. It's advertised basically by this guy who in the way he's designed it, Arthur looks like he could roadie for Megadeth. He's got some sweet blonde hair, and he looks like he's from a Venom album cover.
Yeah. he also like spells out so literally how to pull everybody's struggling to pull this sword out of the stone because they're all like trying to pull on it as hard as it can, and he's like, it takes a gentle hand to move King Arthur's blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, okay, so you have to like pull it lightly. But Arthur doesn't come to this conclusion until a little bit later on.
All your might won't set things right. 'Tis a gentle hand will rule the land. Somehow Arthur gets to skip the line when he just goes up to look at the rock, which I thought was kind of strange. So eventually he gets told that they lost and goes on to the next one. Francine does an archery contest with a rabbit girl who looks just like her. Uses a devious Robin Hood-esque tactic. Does the Glenbrook girl? She like licks her arrow, like it's a plunger instead of an arrowhead, and then like gets it right above Francine so that it slides down and bumps her out of the center.
It's less like archery and more like when you play the target game in Super Monkey Ball, and then you get the power up. So when you hit the target at the end, instead of like acting like normal, some crazy stuff will happen. Like you'll stick to a certain spot. If they were using real arrows, Francine would have had this in the bag.
Absolutely. Super Monkey Ball. Haven't played that in a long time.
Oh my goodness, it's so good. Super Monkey Ball 1 and 2, very good games. Everything else, not so much.
And they also get beat in a tug of war contest, school versus school. And
there's a part in tug of war where Mr. Price Jones gets the kids to recite Newton's formula of I think it's propulsion or something, or movement. I forget exactly. But for some reason, this gives them like a strength boost. Like they sidestep and then shift their momentum and then pull back. And then like Mr. Price Jones is like, oh, Rapper, you didn't get them to memorize Newton's formula. So that's why they lost. And I'm like, no, it's because you guys shifted your weight and then pulled. Like the formula didn't give you like super strength.
Yeah, but it did tell them like what they had to do, though.
I mean, he could have said step to the side and then pull back, and it would have worked just fine.
So at this point, everybody's pretty demoralized because they keep losing. And kind of what I was mentioning earlier about how I like when Mr. Ratburn kind of lightens up a little bit and is a little bit more vulnerable in front of the kids. He's talking about how he was taught by Mr. Price Jones when he was a kid, and he has this line where he says, "Some people think I'm a tough teacher," and Buster just goes, "No."
Buster is the MVP of this episode. Buster's got so many good lines when he was like, no. There's right before that, there's a line about Buster has this kind of, everybody's kind of distraught that Mr. Price Jones's class is like spanking them in all these games. But Buster has this sort of sobering take where he's like, I feel sorry for them. Like, he's a very tough teacher.
Yeah. And Mr. Ratburn kind of gives us some insight about how tough Mr. Price Jones is and was, about how they learned Latin in the 3rd grade and how recess was basically like a ongoing military-style physical challenge. It's pretty intense. And Mr. Ratburn kind of is taking a like inventory of himself next to Mr. Price Jones and wondering if he's not a tough enough teacher. So the kids are emboldened to try and win because they think that if they keep losing, then Mr. Ratburn will be even tougher on them, which seems almost impossible.
The writing in this episode is rock solid because there's multiple motivations that make sense for Mr. Ratburn and the kids to want to win the competition. For Mr. Ratburn, one, he just doesn't like losing. He's competitive and they've never won before. But also, you know, he wants to surpass and prove to his former teacher that he could also succeed and be a really good teacher because he actually holds Mr. Price Jones in high regard. For the kids, there's this initial thing where they're scared that Mr. Ratburn's going to get tougher on them, and so that's their motivation, is they don't want him to be tougher like Mr. Price Jones and copy his teaching style. But also later on, they introduce even more motivation for the kids to want to win, and I think it's really clever the way they do that. It makes you all the more invested in the episode, that the characters are invested for reasons that make total sense.
Yeah, I agree. That's a really good point. They're eating lunch next, and number one Price Jones offers the kids an extra helping of figgy pudding to the first person who can answer the trivia question, who is the 13th King of England? There's a great almost Simpsons-like gag where everybody on the Lakewood side, one by one, turns to where Brain is, and then once the last person looks at Brain, he just looks down because he doesn't know the answer. And there's also a good visual gag where number one Price Jones, he kind of looks at Ratburn. He's like, "You mean you haven't taught them the song?" And,
oh my god!
And Mr. Ratburn just like looks so defeated and just slinks down in his seat.
I think it's hilarious that he actually starts singing this song. I don't know if this is like a real memorization song, like about how to remember is it 43 Kings of England? See, I didn't listen to the song.
42.
42 Kings of England. But we like sort of get the start of it, and then like time marches forward, and all of the Lakewood Elementary kids are like falling asleep, and all the Glenbrook kids are like cheering with glee.
Well, and we find out, like, we have a gag where Arthur looks at his watch and it's like 5 to 12, and then by the time Mr. Price Jones finishes, it's 12:25. So the song takes a half an hour, which sounds like absolute and utter torture. And I don't think this is a real song. It almost can't be, but they did was the lead up and the ending of the song, which I think is great, and all of the shocked and tired faces from everybody is a really funny visual.
You should place the ending of the song in here if you can, because boy howdy does it. They do a good job of making it sound like it's a real like educational song.
Yeah, I'll put it right here.
Winky, C sharp, please. Here's a song that's more historical than musical, to teach the kings of England in the order categorical. And now you know a wondrous thing of 42 English kings.
So they're trying to find an event that they absolutely can win against Glenbrook. Again, you mentioned Buster talking about number one Price Jones, and Arthur's like, we have to find something we can beat them at. And Buster says, but how? We can't beat them. Mr. Price Jones just said so, and he's always right. Like, solid logic there. So they find eventually a mincemeat pie eating contest, which they think is a lock because, of course, they got Buster on their team. And the person that the kid that Buster's facing off with, I think, is also DW's voice actor, but like portraying a boy. Interesting.
I didn't notice that at all. I noticed like Arthur's dad was the guy selling haggis at the start of the episode. But I didn't notice DW doing this kid's voice. I was too distracted by so they have the eating contest, right?
Yeah.
And Buster, of course, slow and steady wins the race. The Glenbrook kid is neatly slicing up his pie and eating it slowly, whereas Buster stuffing his face. And then we cut forward again to the end of the contest. Buster is in obvious pain. The Glenbrook kid looks like he could eat like more and more pies if you could put them in front of him. And Buster sort of, again, continues his streak of being the MVP of this episode, lets out this cry of, where does it all go? He's in so much pain, he can't even understand how this kid's eating so much.
The kid explains that like he expanded his stomach capacity like physically through giant breakfasts, and then asked for ice cream. So the silver lining here is Buster did not win, but don't worry, Buster, that kid's gonna get diabetes.
He like describes how much food he can eat by the gallon, doesn't he?
Like he says he has an 18-liter capacity.
Oh my goodness!
Like that's one fat kid you got there. Not that there's anything wrong with that. In fact, it won. So I can't win an eating contest, and I'm still fat. So there you go. We get the brain competing in something. Sorry, I don't want to miss this. Muffy plays medieval tennis against her bunny counterpart, but her modern tennis gear is not up to the standards of the old way of tennis, which
I should have looked this up because they were like I didn't know they had tennis in the Middle Ages, and then they talk about how this king used this tennis racket in the 16th century, and I'm like, is all of this just BS? Like, is this just Arthur with misinformation lying to me, or is tennis really this old?
yeah, I mean, I really don't know. And they have like a throwaway line of like how the kid is just like, it was invented by Henry III, who is my great 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 uncle, which I don't know if it's true or not. I could look it up. Maybe I will later.
According to Wikipedia,
Uh-huh.
tennis was first played between 1859 and 1865. So I think Arthur might have just been lying to us.
See, kids, that's why you always got to check your sources. So the next one is the brain playing a trivia contest, which has the giant wheel from Uh-Oh. As
I don't know if our American listeners had Uh-Oh. I think it's a Canadian show, right?
It is.
They will never know the nostalgic joy of the Punisher dropping that goop.
you know, if we had the technology, I would love for us to like riff an episode of Uh-Oh.
Oh man, that'd be sick.
Maybe we'll see about that in the future. I'll keep that on the list. So the question that is asked is, what planet does the Earth revolve, or what is it? What does the moon revolve around? What is it?
What do all the planets revolve around?
Thank you. What do all the planets revolve around? Yeah, see? Shows what I know. And Brain easily guesses that it's the sun, but the guy says the correct answer is the Earth. And then Brain's like, but no, that's wrong. And the guy's like, you have to give the answers as they were thought to be correct during the Middle Ages, which is fine, but they clearly didn't explain this to them before they started, so I'm calling bullshit.
Imagine if Brain went on Reddit in 2018 and saw people trying to claim that all the planets revolve around the Earth and the Earth is also flat now. I wonder what he would think of that.
I don't even want to know. I don't even want to entertain those people, to be honest with you. But Buster
But Will, the horizon line.
Horizon line. Buster has a great line here where he kind of stands up and is like, well, we're going to lose. I'm off to go get some like a unicorn dog or something.
He goes, yep, that's it. We've lost for sure now.
And then he goes to get something to eat, and then Francine's just like, but you just did a pie eating contest. And Buster says, I feel empty inside.
Oh, my goodness. Buster had me cackling this whole episode.
So the last event that they can try to win is a castle building contest, which Arthur is very adamant that they try and win, because when he was trying to take out the sword again from the stone, he overhears Principal Haney talking to number one Price Jones, and he infers that he might be looking to replace Mr. Ratburn with Price Jones.
So again, like I was saying before, this is such a genius element to add in to raise the stakes of this final game. As the tension's building, not only are they worried that Mr. Ratburn is going to change his teaching style to be more difficult, but now they're worried that they're actually going to lose Mr. Ratburn as a teacher. I just thought this was it's so clever the way this episode basically ratchets up the tension with this, and also explains why the kids are so invested.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I hadn't thought about the multiple motivations thing until you mentioned it there.
It reminds me, this is kind of an odd aside, but it reminds me of the movie The Silver Linings Playbook. I don't know if you've seen that movie, but one of the genius pieces of writing in that movie is it all sorts of accumulates with this dance contest, right? And that movie does a really clever thing where basically all the characters are invested in what happens to this dance contest, but for totally different reasons. Robert De Niro's character is made a double or nothing bet that is based upon, one, the Eagles winning a football game, and two, the dance contest. So he's invested all of a sudden at the end. Jennifer Lawrence's character's invested, Bradley Cooper's character's invested. And so it's a really genius way to make that movie work at the end and, again, raise the stakes. And so I love that this episode does the same thing.
Yeah, I've actually seen the Silver Linings Playbook 3 times, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And like 2 of those times were in theaters, strangely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, I've seen that movie more than I think that I have. I like it. I like that movie. So they make the Lakewood kids make a really cool castle. I thought this kicked butt.
Working drawbridge and everything.
Yeah, it's great. And it looks like they've won, but again, I feel like this fair has a problem with communicating its rules of the game, because the guy who's judging it, who also looks to be the guy who was working the Excalibur earlier, says that it's like their castle is really good, but the prize is for the most historically accurate castle, which Glenbrook wins because theirs is made out of like mud or something.
And then number 1 Price Jones talks about how the arrow slits are too wide. And then he gets ultra nitpicky and says that back in the day, Lakewood would have been spelled with an E on the end.
Yeah, just all these ways that they lost points. So that's screwy. But Mr. Ratburn's still very proud of it, and he's going to display it. And as they are getting ready to leave, they notice Arthur isn't with them, and it's because he is still at trying to pull Excalibur. And then finally, he has a flash of inspiration, and he understands what he has to do. We get a little thing here where he's in line behind number 1 Price Jones, who can't get the sword out of the stone, but then Arthur realizes he just has to kind of jiggle it a little bit really lightly, and then he lifts.
There's a great line delivery here where he's like, "Why won't you move?" And it reminded me of, I don't know if you've ever seen those Skyrim in real life videos, but it's the one where the guy goes into the pool, like he's acting like a Skyrim NPC, and one of the guards that draws the sword, and he is swimming in the pool, and he's like, "Why won't you die?" Like doing the Skyrim voice acting, and I forget if it's Arthur who says this or Price Jones, but their delivery is almost exactly the same.
No, it's Arthur, but it's in an earlier scene. So Arthur takes the sword out of the stone, and he becomes king of the medieval fair, crown and all, which is pretty awesome. And then number 1 Price Jones remarks that not only did Arthur beat all of his students at guessing the riddle of Excalibur, but also himself, which I thought was I thought that was kind of cheap. It's like Glenbrook Academy is smarter than Arthur and his friends in every way, until they're not, for some reason. Like I have trouble believing that not one of the Glenbrook kids figured out the riddle.
I will say that this is a bit of a deus ex machina to wrap up the story. Even though the kids failed at everything else, number 1 Price Jones is impressed enough that Arthur beat them at this one thing at the end. But I will say that I actually felt better about it because Price Jones makes a really good explanation. He gives a really good explanation where he says that, you taught Arthur to think for himself, and that's the most important thing for a teacher to teach someone. And that's true. You could get them to memorize facts all day long, but if you don't teach them to have basically their own compass and their own deductive reasoning, then there's no point to just there's a lot of parts of this episode where the kids refer to the Glenbrook kids as robots. They're robots. They're basically just regurgitating facts, and I think this is a pretty it exemplifies that Arthur was able to kind of think outside the box because he's learned to think for himself, and the Glenbrook kids were unable to do so.
You've had some great observations this episode.
I don't want to get headed, but I really like this episode.
Well, we're just about there. The end of the episode is them traveling back home, and Mr. Ratburn realizes he hasn't given them homework for today, so he's got to get right on that.
Arthur, again, Buster caps it off with another great line. He goes, "My brain hurts just thinking of Mr. Price Jones."
That was earlier in the episode, right before they left.
Yeah.
So, absolutely. All right, so let's take it back a little bit, all the way back to Arthur's treasure hunt. What'd you think of that one?
Arthur's treasure hunt's okay. It's it feels really short because very little happens in it. It's Arthur decides he wants to dig a hole. He digs a hole. And then he gets his comeuppance for digging the hole. Also, the moral's kind of weird. It's like, don't dig up your mom's lawn if she tells you don't. And also, like, even if a can of digestive cookies isn't cool to you, it might be cool to your friends. It's fun. I don't know. I think it's one of those episodes where, like, I digged a lot when I was a little kid. So it makes sense that, like, kids would want to see this in kids' television, like digging holes, because that's just, like, a childhood thing for some kids. But I don't know. It's like, not a lot happens in this episode.
Yeah, I don't really have any strong feelings one way or the other. It's just kind of meh. I will say, though, and I don't really like to be too critical of the animation because, of course, I can't do it. But I did notice that the animation in this seemed a lot simpler than normal. Not a lot of, like, big expressive movements or, you know, just kind of characters staying on model, not moving around too much in some shots. So it wasn't the greatest it's ever been. Yeah, it was just kind of like, I mean, I'm really, my notes for this were not very long either. It's just kind of, there were a couple of fun ideas in there and fun visual references and all that kind of stuff. But other than that, it's not really one that I would return to again and again or anything like that. It's just kind of, it's there. Now,
I also think this episode is done a disservice by the episode that immediately follows it. I think if this episode was paired with another more middle-of-the-road episode, I'd be more kind to it. But, gosh, The Return of the King is such a banger.
So I'll say that I don't think I like it as much as you do, but I do like it. Return of the King is a very good episode. I think you really actually improved my experience with it because I kind of wasn't. I don't think I was thinking on the levels that you were, but now that I am, I find I appreciate it even more. I think the idea is really fun of them going to a Renaissance fair. It kind of gets them out of the classroom and into a new environment while keeping everybody there. We get some really good Ratburn highlights in this episode, which I appreciate because he's might be my favorite character too.
We get another look into his origin story, like why he's so hard on the kids.
Yeah.
His mentor.
I loved the character of Number One Price Jones.
Oh my god, yeah.
And the Glenbrook kids I thought were very good foils for the group, and I thought this really worked. It's very memorable. It's funny, and you're right. I don't want to take your talking points away from you. So Lucas, please kind of go a bit more in depth with it. Tell us why you love this episode.
Well, I'll say, first off, I do like it for all the same reasons you do. Like, I do love the change of scenery. They could have just made an episode about them going to a Ren fair, so that's just exciting enough just to get them into a new locale. And I love the trope of bizarro versions of the class. Like, whenever that shows up, whether it's a sitcom or animation, where it's like, oh, it's like us, but, like, a little bit different. That's always a really fun trope to me, so I got a kick out of that. But this episode works for a lot of, like, just basic, like, screenwriting reasons. For one, there's a driving motivation throughout the whole episode because it's a contest. But like I said before, the reasons they get both Mr. Ratburn to care about the outcome of the contest as well as the kids, and then they go even further to ratchet up the tension because the kids think that Mr. Ratburn's literally going to not be their teacher anymore, so it raises the stakes. It just gets you really invested in the episode. Just like with anything, like sometimes we give Arthur a pass, I think, just because it's a kids show meant for kids, so they don't have to worry about things making sense that much. But when all of your characters' motivations are true to the characters and make perfect sense, it gets the audience that much more invested in the episode. So all those things combined, plus Buster's hilarious in this episode. Like, his delivery when Mr. Ratburn's like, some people say I'm a tough teacher, and then Buster's like, no! Like, that killed me. I had to pause. I was laughing so hard. So this is definitely, of the episodes in Season 3, this is definitely in my top 3 episodes of Season 3. Not sure if I'm ready to say it's my favorite of the season yet, but I have nothing but good things to say about it.
I'm sort of similar in that I'm not sure if it'll be on the list. Well, you know what? I take that back. I think it will be on the list in some way or another. It's very, very good. And I don't think I love it as much as Lucas does, but I can absolutely see why you do. All right, so there you have it. It's Arthur's Treasure Hunt and Return of the King, maybe themed in that sort of way. What did you think of the episode, and what do you think in general. Would love to hear from you on myriad topics, and of course, hopefully centering around Arthur, the podcast, and more. Here are the ways that you can get in touch with us. We are on social media, of course, at all the places. Facebook.com/Elwood City Limits. On Twitter at ECL Podcast. ElwoodCityLimits.tumblr.com. And you can email us, much like all of our great emailers did this week, ElwoodCityLimits@gmail.com. You can find our website, ElwoodCityLimits.libsyn.com, LIBSYN. And you can also find us on Apple Podcasts and on the Google Play Store. Well, I certainly hope that we will be returning very soon, because next time it's going to be a double-decker DW episode.
Is that just what it's called? Double-decker DW episode?
It could be. We could do that if we wanted to. But it's going to be 2 episodes featuring DW quite prominently. Next time, we're going to be talking about Attack of the Turbo Tibbles and DW Tricks the Tooth Fairy.
Ooh, I think I remember both of these, so this is exciting.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you, and we certainly hope that you keep listening. Thanks, everybody, for continuing to make this podcast very, very special. Hope you have a great week wherever you are. A great couple of weeks if we end up missing another one. Lucas, how's that man cold doing?
I'm over it, but unfortunately my poor girlfriend has caught it from me, so...
Oh, no!
It's a disease-ridden household right now.
Not the woman cold. Well, hopefully that leaves your house very soon. My name's Will Young. This has been Elwood City Limits, and for Lucas Mancini...
I name all my roots.
See you next time.